And if you think of it as an asset, it's very helpful because then you realize it's not competing with the dollar and the euro. It's competing with gold and silver. It's competing with bearer instruments, and to a certain degree, it's competing with bonds as a store of value, and it's competing with ETFs like the S&P 500 index as a store of value. And once you understand it that way, then you're not so afraid anymore. I think that it's a basic human right to property. And what property really means is the ability to store economic energy over time in order to sustain yourself. We know there's 1.7 people or 1.7 billion that are unbanked. And if I really wanted to wreck your life, first I would take away all your money. Then I would take away your banking account. And then I would collapse the currency that you work in so that even if you do make $100, it's only worth 50 next year and 25 the year thereafter, and it buys nothing in 36 to 48 months. So what I think is that Bitcoin represents hope to billions and billions of people around the world. And the right to property is a basic human right. And if we take away a bank of economic energy from humanity, it's the same as sentencing them to slow starvation. So obviously, I'm a big believer that Bitcoin, is critical to spreading human rights around the world. And what you see right now is that in countries where the currency is collapsing, the banking system doesn't work, then people are turning to Bitcoin and they're using their mobile phones to hold a crypto asset in order to protect themselves. I think that the way the world is evolving, we're going to see 5 billion or more people with mobile phones and mobile wallets. And in that wallet is going to be a selection of currencies and a selection of assets. And the strongest currency is the dollar, and the strongest asset is Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is the global monetary network that allows everybody on Earth to store their economic energy over long periods of time. And it also allows everyone to synchronize those mobile wallets in Zimbabwe and Venezuela and Nigeria and India and Argentina and the US and China and the like. And so I see an emerging economy with a digital asset called Bitcoin and a digital currency, likely the dollar, but if not the dollar, perhaps the renminbi, right? And if not the Chinese currency, then perhaps the euro. At the end of the day, the winner is going to be the strongest currency, which will come from the strongest country and the strongest economic network, which will be the US. And the winning asset will be the strongest crypto asset with the greatest security and the greatest acceptance and the most stability, and that will be Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a crypto asset. It's not a cryptocurrency. It's a tragic misnomer. And because people call it a cryptocurrency, then it lends itself to a shallow criticism that it's not good as a currency because the central banks will ban it, and because the tax treatment is poor, and because the transaction rate is low. But again, those are all red herrings. It's not a currency, nor does it need to be a currency, right? Anybody thinking about it for even a few seconds realizes that if there's a taxable event every time I transfer it to you, it can't be a currency. So right. No, it's not a currency. It's an asset. And if you think of it as an asset, it's very helpful because then you realize it's not competing with the dollar and the euro. It's competing with gold and silver. It's competing with bearer instruments, and to a certain degree, it's competing with bonds as a store of value, and it's competing with ETFs like the S&P 500 index as a store of value. And once you understand it that way, then you're not so afraid anymore because you understand the regulatory framework that comes to Bitcoin is the same regulatory framework that comes to gold, silver, and S&P 500 indexes. It's just know your customer, anti-money laundering regulations. And if you're afraid to buy Bitcoin because you're afraid of regulation, you shouldn't be, because if it is regulated pari passu or at parity with these other assets, it will create it'll create a avalanche of institutional money flow into the asset class, because it'll simply normalize the treatment in the Western world. The IRS in 2014 deemed it to be property.
Right. But
And
I mean,
as property, it means that when you transfer it, you owe a capital gains tax. So there is like zero chance the IRS is going to reverse that. It is property. It's not a currency. Now, I'll make one more point. It doesn't make any sense to pay for anything in Bitcoin for two reasons. The first reason is because it's a taxable event, and you're a fool to accelerate taxes on your own person by a decade. The second reason it doesn't make sense is because it's a long duration asset that's deflationary, which means it's likely to go up in value. It's been going up 150 to 200% a year every year for a decade. So why would you pay $1 million in Bitcoin to buy something which is going to depreciate in value, when the $1 million in Bitcoin may very well double 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more times, right? So it's a long-term investment asset. A much wiser course of action would be to borrow money against Bitcoin. If you have an appreciating asset, never sell it, finance it. And if the asset's appreciating at 20% a year, and if the interest rate is 5%, then it's pretty obvious what you ought to do is keep the asset, pay 5% interest, because the tax bill on money that's borrowed is zero. So you could live off of your borrowings against your appreciating asset for the rest of your life, without ever paying the asset back, without ever paying the loan back, and without ever paying any income tax, and without ever paying any capital gains tax in the U.S. Other tax regimes may be different, but in the U.S. right now, that would be the treatment. Like, you can be rich with a Ferrari, a yacht, and a jet. You need to have borrowed the money against a tangible asset, which is going up in value as the money supply expands, in order to keep and pay for the Ferrari, the yacht, and the jet.